The Senate is expected to vote tomorrow on the For the People Act. The extensive voting rights and election reform legislation would implement automatic same-day and online voter registration nationwide. It would expand voting by mail and reform the redistricting process. The proposal also limits the ability of states to purge voter rolls and regulates campaign finance spending. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says he wants to, quote, see where everyone stands. But Republicans have made it clear where they stand. They do not support the legislation. Democrats are instead focusing on presenting a united front. That means convincing West Virginia's Joe Manchin to sign onto the bill. The moderate Democrat says he does not back the For the People Act as written from the House, but he did lay out a proposal that includes much of the same voting rights reforms. Senator Manchin wants to expand early voting, ban partisan gerrymandering, make Election Day a holiday, and create alternatives for voter identification. We will find out by tomorrow how he decides to cast his vote. For now, let's bring in Elizabeth Hira to talk more about voting rights. She's a Spitzer Fellow and Policy Counsel for the NYU Brennan Center for Justice's Democracy Program. She's also a former aide to then-Senator Kamala Harris and helped craft H.R. 1 as a staffer on the House Administration Committee. Elizabeth, welcome. Great to have you with us. Why do you believe so strongly in this bill?
Why I think the bill is the next great Civil Rights Act is because it's doing two things. First, it is advancing and protecting voting rights for every eligible American, which I really consider to be the work of the 1965 Civil Rights Act or Voting Rights Act, and answering a fundamental question about America, which is, should every eligible American have access to the right to vote, both freely and fairly? And that is one thing that the bill is accomplishing. But the reason that I really think it is the next great civil rights bill is it's doing more than answering a question from 1965. It's really fundamentally looking at the structure of American democracy and saying, what would it require for us to have a fully inclusive and reflective democracy? And through its amazing and sort of transformative campaign finance work, it is creating just structural reform that needs to be in place for everyday Americans to be at the table. And I think just to quickly summarize what that looks like, the current Congress that we have is the most diverse we have ever had in history, ever. It is 77% white. It is 73% male. Fewer than 5% of people in the Congress, in the last Congress, actually ever reported having worked a blue-collar job. And so when you start to connect those dots, you see that everyday people are not at the table in the current congressional structure. And that means that everyday people's priorities are not being lifted up in the way that they should. And so the For the People Act, again, not only does the critical work of protecting voting rights for every eligible American, but it changes the structure of who actually can run to represent us. So it's not just who can vote, but it's who can we vote for to make sure everyone's included in the process.
But knowing that the congressional support doesn't appear to be there at the moment, let's talk about the compromise that's laid out by Senator Joe Manchin, which has a lot of the pieces of this bill in it as well. Not everything, but some. Should Democrats support his proposal as a way to get unified support within the party and just to get some voting rights legislation done?
So I think it's really important to contextualize. And Tanya, you're totally right that we do need to move on Mr. Manchin. But I think to offer some context for folks, I think pundits were really eager to declare the bill dead only 2 weeks ago when Senator Manchin said that he would not support it. And in the time that we've seen pass since then, we've seen him come to the table with ideas to try to get Republican voters to move, or Republican leaders to move. They very clearly responded last week saying that they do not seem to support some of the bare minimum of what he was proposing. And the great news is that brings Senator Manchin back to the table to the Democrats with the bill, because as he himself has said, inaction is simply not an option. And I think to come back to that civil rights framing, it is really critical that we not negotiate against our interests. If we know that giving some of the House away doesn't actually bring Republicans into the fold, then we need to figure out what's best for the American people. And Senator Manchin actually, I'm sure, has been hearing loud and clear extensive amount of polling has been done in West Virginia that his own constituents and voters are deeply supportive of the For the People Act. Actually, like America nationally, the bill has bipartisan support from voters. It does not have support from Republican leaders. And I think helping Senator Manchin hear that and know that he has the support of constituents across the country is one of the critical things to keep him at the negotiating table, to not create the skinniest version of the bill when that actually doesn't do all the work that we could do right now.
So let me ask you something. You do think then that Republicans on the Hill will come around to some sort of voting rights legislation or not? And if the answer is no, you don't think that they will, then how do you think that Democrats should proceed? What are your feelings about the filibuster?
Well, I think, again, for context, what's really important is that there has been action that is not bipartisan. All of the state level voter suppression efforts that we're seeing really have not been bipartisan. They are one party pushing for suppressive effects. And for success for the People Act, what it really requires is, again, 50 votes in the Senate and the vote of the vice president as a tiebreaker to get that over the line. To talk about the filibuster, again, I think it's a little bit inside baseball and it's not technically changing the rules, but 50 senators plus the vote of the vice president could effectively change the rules to get this bill over the line. So this sort of idea that you need 60 senators to come together for anything to happen misunderstands and miscommunicates what really is required for this bill to move. And I think for that reason, it's unfair to let either party hold advancement hostage. If there are bipartisan efforts that have not been met with success, then I think we need to look at the rules, which is what Leader Schumer is actually doing, to see what changes need to happen to get this over the line. And again, with 50 senators and the vote of the vice president, the bill could get over the line.
All right, Elizabeth, let me ask you about some of the specific bits of the legislation, though, because neither Senator Manchin's compromise nor the For the People Act take extensive action on acts of election subversion. That includes directly addressing the sham audit of former President Trump's defeat in Arizona, or threats implemented by Republican state legislatures to take away power from secretaries of state or nonpartisan officials. Do these bills not do more to address these issues because they simply hadn't really come up before, in a major way before the most recent election? But now that we've seen what we've seen, shouldn't Democrats be focusing on that as well?
I think it is a very much yes and situation. And Tanya, your point, unfortunately, is exactly right. Putting my kind of old congressional staffer hat on, some of these things are just unfathomable that you would think you would interfere and insert your judgment in place of the will of the voters. It's just not something that I think we would have thought we had to say no to, much like we wouldn't have thought we would have to say no to bans on bringing people water in line, right? So as you say, these are innovative restrictions that are being offered. And the great thing about where HR 1 is, or where S1, the For the People Act is right now, is that there is still space to be amending and negotiating around exactly those sorts of changes that need to happen. But I think the broader point that's very important to make is that the design of the bill is very carefully put together to actually restore voters' confidence in the integrity of our elections. And that's money for election security, as well things like as making sure that there are paper ballots that you can have sort of, with certainty that your vote was casted and counted as cast. And I think it just reminds Americans, particularly in the wake of the big lie, that we had actually in the 2020 election, the most secure election we'd ever had in history. And so I think some of these efforts to substitute the decisions of the voters with the Board of Elections undermines people's confidence in their vote and in our system. And that actually is exactly the opposite of what achieving HR 1 would do. It would let people know that our systems are safe, our elections matter, and that your participation matters in those elections more than anything. So we are able to restore the confidence of the American voter through this package. And I think, unfortunately, that's not really one of the goals of the folks who are opposed to the bill.
All right. Well, Elizabeth Hira, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you sharing your insight into this legislation with us.
Thanks so much for having me.